Imagine this. You've been stranded for weeks. No rescue, no food, no animals left to hunt. Your stomach hurts so badly that even the thought of eating tree bark starts to sound reasonable. Then, you find a body, and suddenly, a question you never thought you'd have to answer becomes terrifyingly real. Would eating another human actually keep you alive, or would it kill you? Most people already know their answer. No. Not because they've studied biology, not because they've read history, because something inside them reacts first. A feeling, a deep instinctive sense that this is wrong. Not just morally wrong, biologically wrong, but have you ever stopped and asked, why? Because if humans are just another species of animal, why can we eat cows, but not people? Why can we eat pigs, even though they're genetically closer to us than cows are? Yet the idea of eating another human feels almost impossible to accept. Is human meat poisonous? Does it contain some secret toxin? Or is there something far stranger happening inside your own brain? Here's what's fascinating. Your body doesn't actually know the difference between a steak, a pork chop, or human muscle. To your stomach, meat is just meat, protein, fat, water, calories. Your digestive system doesn't scan every bite and announce, human detected, emergency shutdown. It simply breaks food apart. That's its job. So from a purely biological perspective, the answer isn't what most people expect. Human meat isn't automatically toxic. In fact, if scientists analyzed a piece of human muscle in a laboratory without telling you where it came from, it would look surprisingly ordinary, which creates an uncomfortable contradiction. If your body can digest it, then why has almost every civilization on Earth treated cannibalism as one of the greatest taboos imaginable? Pause for a second. Think about how unusual that is. Human cultures disagree on almost everything: religion, politics, marriage, food, clothing, even what counts as polite. Yet thousands of cultures, separated by oceans, languages, and centuries, arrived at almost the same conclusion. Don't eat people. That's not normal. When completely different societies independently create the same rule, scientists pay attention, because that usually means the rule wasn't invented randomly. It solved a problem, a very old one. But before we uncover that problem, there's another mystery. Cannibalism isn't unique to humans. Far from it. More than 1,500 animal species have been observed eating members of their own kind. Spiders do it, fish do it, hamsters do it. Even adorable-looking animals sometimes eat their own offspring. Nature can be brutally practical. When food disappears, when competition becomes extreme, or when survival hangs by a thread, cannibalism appears again and again. So if it's common throughout nature, why didn't humans simply evolve to do the same? After all, evolution doesn't care about feelings. It doesn't care about morality. It cares about one thing: survival. If eating another human increased your chances of surviving, wouldn't evolution have encouraged it? That sounds logical. Until you realize something strange about evolution. Evolution doesn't reward behaviors that help you survive today. It rewards behaviors that help your genes survive tomorrow. And those are not always the same thing. Imagine finding a shortcut through a forest. It saves you hours at first. Then you discover every traveler who takes that shortcut eventually falls into the same hidden pit. Suddenly, it isn't a shortcut anymore. It's a trap. Cannibalism works in much the same way. In the short term, it provides calories. In the long term, it can destroy entire communities. And that's where this story takes a dark turn, because the greatest danger of eating another human isn't what you're eating, it's what you're inheriting. Every person you meet carries an invisible world inside them. Trillions of bacteria, viruses, parasites, microscopic passengers that spend their entire existence learning how to survive inside a human body. Not a cow, not a pig, not a deer, a human. Now ask yourself something. If those organisms have already spent years adapting to living inside someone exactly like you, how difficult would it be for them to move into your body? Not very. In fact, your greatest biological defense against many diseases is difference. A chicken virus is usually adapted for chickens. A cow parasite often prefers cows. Different species create biological barriers. They're like different operating systems. A program designed for one doesn't always run on another. But humans all run almost the same system, which means the pathogens that infect one person already know how to navigate another. It's as if an intruder already has the blueprint to your house before they ever reach your front door. And that's only the beginning, because hidden inside one particular part of the human body lurks something even more terrifying. something that isn't alive, can't be killed by antibiotics, doesn't trigger your immune system, and once it enters your brain, modern medicine can do almost nothing to stop it. It isn't a virus, it isn't bacteria, it isn't even technically alive, and yet it has destroyed entire communities. Its name is a prion, and once you understand what a prion actually is, you'll realize that the real reason humans evolved to avoid cannibalism has almost nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with survival. What makes a prion so terrifying isn't how complex it is, it's how unbelievably simple it is. Imagine walking into a room filled with perfectly folded paper cranes, hundreds of them, every single one folded exactly the same way. Now imagine placing just one badly folded crane on the table, and somehow, without anyone touching them, every perfect crane slowly begins copying the broken one by one, until the entire room is filled with twisted paper. That's essentially what a prion does, except instead of paper, it's happening to the proteins inside your brain. Your body depends on proteins. They build your muscles, carry oxygen, repair damaged cells, keep your nervous system running. But for proteins to work, they have to be folded into an incredibly precise shape. A prion is simply a protein that folded the wrong way. Normally, that shouldn't be a disaster. Proteins misfold all the time. Your cells usually recognize the mistake, break the protein apart, and replace it. Problem solved, but prions don't follow the rules. A prion acts like a biological bad influence. When it touches a healthy protein, it forces that healthy protein to fold incorrectly too. Now there are 2, then 4, then 8, then hundreds, then millions. Not because they're reproducing like bacteria, but because they're converting perfectly healthy proteins into broken copies of themselves. It's less like an infection and more like a chain reaction. Imagine knocking over the first domino, except every domino that falls creates 2 more rows of dominoes. The collapse accelerates faster and faster until eventually entire regions of the brain begin falling apart, literally, under a microscope. Brain tissue damaged by prion diseases looks disturbingly similar to a sponge. Tiny holes appear where healthy brain cells once existed. Memories disappear, coordination vanishes, personality changes, speech becomes difficult. The body slowly loses control of itself. And once symptoms begin, there's currently no cure, no medicine that stops it, no surgery that removes it, no antibiotic that kills it. Because antibiotics kill living organisms. A prion was never alive in the first place, which makes it one of the strangest biological threats scientists have ever discovered. But here's the question. If prions are so dangerous, why don't we hear about them all the time? Because thankfully, they're incredibly rare. Most people will never encounter one. In fact, you could live your entire life without ever thinking about prions, unless you practice cannibalism, because one of the highest concentrations of prions in the human body is found in the brain and nervous system. And history gives us a chilling example of what can happen when those tissues become part of a cultural tradition. Deep in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, there once lived a group of people known as the Four. For generations, when a loved one died, some family members took part in ritual cannibalism. To outsiders, it sounds horrifying, but to the Four, it wasn't an act of violence. It was an act of love, a way of keeping the deceased close, a final expression of respect. No one knew they were passing along something invisible. Years later, some members of the community began developing a mysterious illness. At first, it looked almost harmless, a slight tremor, difficulty walking, uncontrollable laughter. Then the symptoms became impossible to ignore. Balance disappeared, speech faded, muscles stopped obeying the brain. Eventually, the disease became fatal. The Four called it Kuru, the laughing sickness, not because people were happy, but because the disease caused uncontrollable bursts of laughter as it damaged the brain. For years, no one understood what was happening. Some believed it was caused by spirits. Others blamed curses. The real cause was almost impossible to imagine. Every funeral created the possibility of another victim, not because the dead intended harm, but because prions hidden inside brain tissue silently moved from one person to the next, generation after generation. Researchers eventually discovered that once ritual cannibalism stopped, new cases of Kuru almost completely disappeared. One cultural practice had unknowingly created the perfect pathway for one of nature's strangest diseases. And Kuru teaches us something much bigger than a single historical tragedy. It reveals a hidden weakness in the human body. The closer two species are, the easier it can be for certain diseases to cross between them. That's why doctors worry about organ transplants, blood transfusions, and contaminated surgical instruments. Not because the human body is fragile, but because our biology is incredibly compatible with other humans. Ironically, the thing that allows one person to donate a kidney or save another person's life with blood also means that dangerous human-specific diseases have an easier path between us than diseases from many other animals. Nature gave us empathy, cooperation, the ability to care for strangers, but it also came with a hidden cost. We are, biologically speaking, the most compatible hosts for each other, and that changes the entire question. Maybe the real mystery was never, can humans eat human meat? Maybe the better question is, why would evolution ever let us want to? Because here's something most people never realize. Evolution doesn't write laws. It writes instincts. It can't tell you, never do this. It can't explain disease or teach microbiology. All it can do is slowly shape what feels natural and what feels deeply, almost irrationally, wrong. Think about spoiled milk. You don't need a chemistry degree to know it smells bad. Your brain doesn't calculate bacterial growth. It simply says, don't drink that. Disgust is one of evolution's oldest shortcuts, a fast, emotional answer to dangers that are too slow to calculate. Long before humans understood germs, long before anyone had ever heard the word protein or prion, our ancestors were already making survival decisions. The people who instinctively avoided rotting bodies were less likely to become sick. The people who avoided contaminated food were more likely to survive long enough to have children. Over thousands of generations, those tiny survival advantages accumulated, not into a rule book, but into a feeling. That strange tightening in your stomach, that instinctive, no. And suddenly, something fascinating happens. Morality and biology begin to overlap. Did humans create the taboo against cannibalism because it was morally wrong? Or did our biology make the practice so dangerous that nearly every culture eventually turned survival into morality? No one can answer that perfectly, but one thing is clear. Our emotions aren't separate from evolution. They're one of evolution's greatest inventions. Fear kept our ancestors away from cliffs. Pain kept them away from fire. Disgust kept them away from invisible dangers. Long before they understood what those dangers were, it's easy to think of disgust as an annoying emotion. The reason certain smells make you gag. The reason spoiled food turns your stomach. The reason you recoil from things that seem unclean. But imagine living without it. Every meal becomes a gamble. Every carcass becomes a possibility. Every source of infection looks just as appealing as fresh food. Disgust isn't a flaw, it's a filter, one that has quietly protected our species for tens of thousands of years. And that explains something else. If human meat isn't automatically poisonous, why does nearly everyone react so strongly to the very idea? Because your brain isn't only thinking about nutrition, it's thinking about consequences. Without you realizing it, every generation inherited tiny behavioral tendencies from the generation before. Not memories, not instructions, just subtle biases, small preferences, powerful instincts, enough to make dangerous choices feel emotionally expensive. That's one of evolution's favorite strategies. Instead of forcing behavior, it nudges behavior again and again across thousands of generations until the safest option feels like common sense. Of course, history isn't completely free of cannibalism. There have been desperate shipwrecks, starvation during sieges, plane crashes in remote mountains, moments when people faced impossible choices. Those stories remind us of something uncomfortable. Under extreme conditions, the instinct to survive can overpower almost any other instinct. Not because people suddenly stop being human, but because evolution built another powerful drive into us. Stay alive. When survival and disgust collide, there isn't always an easy answer. Fortunately, almost none of us will ever face that decision, which means for most people, cannibalism remains exactly what evolution seems to have wanted it to become: unthinkable. So, let's go back to the question we started with. Why can't we eat human meat? The surprising answer is, in the strictest biological sense, you can. Your stomach can digest it. Your body can extract nutrients from it. But that's the wrong question. The better question is, should humans have ever evolved to make that a normal part of survival? And nature's answer appears to be no. Not because human flesh is magically toxic, not because there's a biological alarm that activates the instant it touches your tongue, but because over countless generations, the risks became greater than the reward. Diseases that already knew how to infect humans, rare but devastating prion disorders, the loss of trust inside communities, the danger of turning other people into food instead of family. All of those pressures pointed evolution in the same direction. Avoid this, not through logic, through instinct. That's why the most remarkable part of this story isn't the disease, or the history, or even the science. It's you. Because before you learned a single fact about prions, before you heard the word Kuru, before anyone explained the biology, you probably already had the answer. Something inside you rejected the idea immediately. That reaction wasn't ignorance. It may have been one of the oldest survival programs your species has ever written. Your body isn't perfectly designed. It's the product of millions of years of compromises. Every instinct you have, every emotion you feel, every unconscious hesitation carries echoes of problems your ancestors had to solve long before history was ever written. Sometimes, the smartest decisions your brain makes are the ones that never feel like decisions at all. And perhaps that's the strangest part of this entire story. The real reason humans don't eat humans was never hidden in our stomachs. It was hidden in our minds.